Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Scott Lindquist. Today's topic, what your CFO wants to tell you but won't. Now, Scott started his career at Price Waterhouse Coopers and went on to become the Chief Financial Officer of Farmers, a position he held for over 13 years. He is currently the CFO of CNA Financial, which is another insurance company based in the Midwest. Now, full disclosure, Scott and I worked together during my 8 years at Farmers, where he was a fantastic business partner, and where we actually jointly managed the Marketing CFO. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, thanks very much, Mike. It's an honor to be with you today. And just want to say I had a lot of fun, ton of fun working with you at Farmers over the years. And I'd say everything I know about marketing, I think I learned from you. So thanks for inviting me to your pod. And just a little fun fact here too, CFO, Chief Financial Officer. I was also known, as you recall, as Chief Fun Officer too. So
yes, you knew yourself as that.
That's right.
You were
right.
one, I will say, you were one of the more funny, approachable CFOs. So and let's talk about that. Speaking of CFOs, you know, you've met a lot of them, obviously. And give us a quick overview of your take on CFOs in the marketplace. I mean, I always think there's some CFOs that are focused solely on costs. There's CFOs that are true business partners like you are. There's the folks that say no all the time. And obviously, some of those types are more receptive to marketing than others. Just tell us an overview of your take on what's really out there in the CFO marketplace.
Yeah, no, sure. That's a great question, Mike. And, you know, my experience over the years, I mean, I've seen just a wide variety of CFO roles out there. And, you know, my experience, it typically tracks very closely to where the organization is in their strategic life cycle, whether you're a startup, you're in aggressive growth mode, turnaround, you know, private equity owned, looking for a liquidity event, or a steady state Fortune 100 type role. And in my experience, the CFO needs to really be joined at the hip with the CEO, with the Chief Executive Officer, almost to the point where you can actually finish each other's sentences. You're always kind of on that same frame of mind and whatnot. And so, yeah, I've certainly seen the Dr. No type CFOs. I've seen the hatchet man, bad cop type CFO. I've seen financial engineering type investment banker CFOs. And then, of course, the true business partner type CFO. And, you know, it's really a neat trick to just kind of pull off all of those roles at the same time.
Hey, just a quick question. How often would you say, at percentage-wise, out of 100, how many CFOs are really true business partners?
I'd say the majority of them. I think the majority of the successful CFOs are really, at the end of the day, true business partners that have really that deep embedded knowledge of the strategic underpinnings of a company, true understanding of the levers that grow a company, and not just financially. I mean, obviously that's a key point, but strategically, and able to kind of connect those dots as to how does a company do business, the underpinnings for how does a company make money. And, you know, I think I learned from you and certainly others, it's all about, you know, the end consumer. You know, what are we delivering for a value proposition? And then how do you make that actual linkage to the financial dynamics of a company? And there's going to be a short-term view, there's going to be a medium-term view, and there's going to be kind of very long-term view. And I've just seen a wide mix of that in my career.
Thank you. I do think, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, I do think if you're interviewing for a CMO job, you should absolutely always meet the CFO in addition to the CEO to get a feel for what type of CFO you are going to be working with. And we can talk more about that later, like questions you might want to ask in the interview of the CFO. But let's stay on insurance here for a minute.
Sure.
Insurance has been a hotbed of marketing over the last 2 decades, really spending, billions and billions every year, more than beer. I know commercial lines is a little different, but what's your take on that? Tell us about marketing in the insurance industry, which 30 years ago, you would have never expected what you have in insurance now, which is this massive influx of money and brand building. Give us your take.
No doubt about it. I mean, I certainly saw that in my last company being a retail-focused insurer, and no doubt about it, it's been a hotbed of marketing and advertising, particularly with the onset of the direct-to-consumer channel for auto insurers, a little bit lesser extent for homeowners. But you mentioned beer. I mean, I think I learned some years back. I mean, it's been a top 5 category for media spend, right up there with pharmaceuticals and autos, also in addition to beer. Right. So, I kind of use the obvious examples of Geico and Progressive. Yeah. And as you know, Mike, I mean, they have done massive tens of billions of dollars of investment in their brands over the years, and to the point where the Geico caveman or the lizard or Flo from Progressive are ubiquitous, right? Everybody knows who they are, and what it does is it just turned those companies into category killers now, to the extent they've taken massive market share from the traditional personal lines agency.
Massive. I mean, we're talking like huge amounts of share points in a $1 billion category, and also beneath all that is a pretty advantaged financial model as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it, and they've really disintermediated the agency. I mean, listen, the big agency brands are still gigantic, but what the direct-to-consumers have done through the power of brand building, through the use and power of marketing, is they've really squeezed out the second-tier insurers, and in fact, they're right on the heels of the top market shares, and to the point where these carriers were like nothing 30 years ago. I mean, those carriers were kind of no market share. So, I mean, that, from my view, was just a massive strategic investment in brand building and leveraging that towards the direct-to-consumer channel and taking advantage of the technology now. I mean, the internet, obviously, and social media, obviously. We didn't have that 30 years ago, but they've leveraged their brand to really just massively overwhelm those channels.
It's an interesting thing, and I'd love your opinion on this, which is you have an industry run essentially by actuaries and financial people with tons of surplus, actually leading the charge over the last 2 decades on brand building and marketing. Is that a leap of faith by these companies, or is that a learn as you go kind of thing? What's your take on how the industry got to where it is?
Well, you said actuaries, and I know I'm tempted to do some actuary jokes here now, but don't want to get off track here.
If you want to say one, you can knock one out. But yeah, all right.
No. So yeah, no. I mean, it's a significant amount of leap of faith, right? Because you talk about the investment in brands and investment in marketing. In the financial types, the actuarial types are always looking for that immediate gratification, right?
Right.
When's my return?
Am I getting a return? Predictability. I mean, one of the things about actuaries is their whole job is to predict stuff with as much certainty as possible. And you have this kind of way of, you're going to build this brand and then you're going to win at least the consideration and get people to come in and get a shot at the business. But that is a pretty big leap of faith. Keep going. I just didn't reject that.
No, it totally is. I mean, if you're talking, hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars invested in a brand or marketing, you're like, wow, when do I get that return? And of course, it comes to marketing math. And I learned that certainly from you and your team several years back, is like really, truly understanding that marketing math and understanding the dynamics and the product management, the product pricing, understand how that helps retention. How does that drive new business? How does it drive bundling? And then, it needs to all fit together to say, yeah, over a 5 to 7 year period, we're going to have returns that exceed our cost of capital. And these days, cost of capital, I'm just going to use, 8 to 10%. It depends on the company. But and it's
just
all about,
so all our listeners know, just give us the top line of how cost of capital is calculated.
Yeah. For most insurance companies, I'm just going to use an example. Capital is comprised of a mix of debt and equity. Generally speaking, 20 to 25% of debt, 75 to 80% equity. The debt is going to be how much it costs for you to borrow on the open markets, and cost of debt is higher now with higher interest rates. So you could issue bonds 5-6%. There, and then the cost of equity, it's kind of this Black-Scholes option
I love the
model
model
on Bloomberg. So, listeners, just Google it, right? Cost of equity, you can find in Bloomberg. But most companies, 8 to 10% is a good threshold. So when I'm looking to say, all right, we're going to invest $1 billion in building a brand, how am I going to get more than an 8 to 10% return? Right. And we measure returns by looking at present value of future cash flows. And present value of future cash flows, there's going to be a lot of assumptions in there. But you know what? That $1 billion is going out the door today. You're looking to recover that over a number of years. So that's where the marketing math gets very important in understanding the levers around, is this product really going to sell? Are we going to gain market share? Are we going to make profit? Obviously. Are we going to drive higher retention, which drives profitability? Are we going to drive bundling? So adding additional products to households. Are we going to drive households?
Yeah, and that goes to, how much you think a customer's worth and customer lifetime value, which is, if I acquire you, am I acquiring you and you're going to be this at like $100 person? Or if I acquire you, are you going to be a $5,000 person? And that really is a lot of assumptions. But beneath all this cost of capital and the spending is this leap of faith that you're going to spend a lot of money now on something that is kind of hard to put your arms around, and it's going to pay out later, right?
No, that's right. And like I say, a lot of judgment. My career, we've been in big conference rooms where we've been kind of debating this and debating assumptions employed. And listen, I mean, it's like anything else. I mean, it's always going to be, there's a certain amount of data-driven element to it. There's going to be a lot of business judgment, a lot of business sense, a lot of kind of gut feel on that. So it's actually very fascinating seeing that unfold. But listen, there's been several companies, and a few of them I mentioned earlier, have been very, extraordinarily successful in making those big bets. And
tell us, you moved from a B2C insurance company to what is much more of almost a pure B2B company. Tell us the difference.
Yeah, it's tremendously different, and I joined my current company about 2.5 years ago or so, and absolutely drinking through a fire hose. I mean, I had exposure to a certain amount of commercial insurance through prior companies, but it was much more pronounced, much more significant in the current company. So it was really getting to know as soon as possible, like a 100-day plan, right? Getting to know everybody immediately, all the various functions, all the strategy of the company, how's the distribution work, how's that interplay with the customers, product pricing attributes, retention attributes, what drives the value proposition, what drives the brand, the importance of the brand, and how does that
You are talking so much like a marketing guy. You're not even talking about the CFO onboarding. You're talking about the marketing onboarding. This is very exciting to me.
Well, and I must say, I've been doing the CFO thing for a while, and I kind of say, kind of half jokingly, you've seen one insurance company, you've seen them all from a finance perspective. They all have their very different nuances, but I was immediately very focused on just, how we make money, how's the company make money, and how does finance be an enabling function to drive that strategic growth. I mean, listen, we have a great team, that closes the books, that files the tax returns, that files the regulatory reporting, and it's all
FP&A, all the FP&A work.
FP&A work, that's and just excellent, outstanding type stuff. It's table stakes. I think like where can I add the most value to the organization? It's just kind of having that forward look and hoping to just drive overall value for the company. And so yeah, that was kind of a big change going from that retail to the B2B, but it's been great.
And if for our listeners out there, when a new CFO comes in to the org, what is the best way for marketing to onboard the CFO or to get the CFO to kind of understand what they're doing? Like, give our listeners some tips as to what you, who is a believer in marketing, would like, and then maybe some of those other types. Give our listeners tips on how should they approach the CFO and onboard them.
I think so. So first thing is just build alliances with your peers, and that's one thing I did really immediately was just build alliances amongst everyone who throughout the organization running major businesses, major parts of the organization, and through that is just like I would always say, how can I help you as CFO accomplish your job, and it becomes kind of this.
I'm going to just say, not all CFOs say that. Some CFOs say, I need 10% more back from you.
Yeah.
But I understand. Yeah.
And it's all about building relationships, right? I learned that a long time ago. And it's all about, learning. I mean, embracing lifelong learning. And that's what I've done. I know when I first met you many years ago or so, you and I met each other and built that kind of week to week kind of rapport and relationship and mutual respect. And obviously we became friends very quickly. And so I think, you learned from me asking a ton of questions of me. I learned from you by asking a ton of questions of you.
And we had a great marketing CFO too.
Well, I think that was,
I had that idea for you and you supported it immediately. And that was really a big help.
I think that was key, because, and I'm a huge proponent of any large function, whether it's marketing or if you're running a distribution or running a business unit, just having your own CFO, if you will, kind of reporting to you. And that was, given the budget that we had, the amount of dollars, it made total sense at our last company. And it was great because the marketing CFO, he took ownership of the marketing math, particularly around the performance marketing. Took ownership around connecting the dots as far as investing brand dollars, marketing dollars into how does that build brand consideration, how does that build retention, how does that build bundling, and then kind of laying that out and making the case to the finance community, say like, hey, here's our return, and we'd stress it up or down and really kind of understand that, get the finance folks just really comfortable with the numbers. And I must say, great track for anybody in the finance area to go be a marketing CFO, because I know you and I are thinking of the same person. I don't know if he's listening out there.
Shout out to Scott Lindquist while we're right here.
Scott Lindquist, yeah.
Hey, Scott Lindquist, thanks for the work.
He's gonna go viral now, but no, he learned a ton on marketing, and he learned so much from you and your team and about the business that I'm not sure he'll ever turn back. I think he's be kind of a lifelong marketer.
We love that about him. Though he was also really good at saying no when it was appropriate. So you are obviously a marketing believer and in the power of marketing, but I don't think they train that at Price Waterhouse Coopers or in your accounting degree. How did this happen to you? How did you become a believer?
The last company we worked with, it was really the first company I worked for who had this gigantic national brand, but it wasn't big enough though. It was something that we needed to take to the next level, and the dollar amounts of investment required were eye-watering, eye-popping at first blush. So that's one of the things I spent a lot of time with you and Scott Lindquist really just diving into that as far as what are we getting for our marketing investment, and how's that going to drive future value, and so that was just a tremendous learning exercise for me, and in particular the performance marketing aspect of that. And I think you told me, or somebody told me, you see a lot of these commercials, the call to action commercials on TV, and I always kind of shook my head. It's like, are people really dialing these 1-800 numbers? Are they really clicking? And I think they said, hey, you would not see them on TV if they did not work. And so I saw all the data behind that. You guys showed me all the data about how all that stuff drove clicks, how it drove phone calls. And it was really just kind of fascinating for me seeing that investment manifest itself in actually the numbers turning into growth. And so I was a true believer pretty quickly. Then the other thing too, and I think this before I met you, we did a brand valuation study, which I had never heard of this, but we hired it was an investment banking type valuation firm that specialized in doing valuation metrics around brands. And the brand, we came up, a certain amount of judgment, some marketing math in there, but we're talking the value of these brands, are just multiple billion-dollar brands just through the depth and breadth of reach and the power to drive earnings. But that was a huge awakening for me.
It's super fascinating, and this is an accounting thing that actually really bugs me, is if I buy a company, the value of the brand shows up as goodwill when I buy that company. But if I build that brand myself, it is nowhere on the balance sheet. And that drives me crazy. Anyway.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's always this kind of squishy, intangible asset.
Until you buy it. When you buy it, it has a value, but it doesn't have any value until you buy it, which makes no sense. But so this brings me to if I'm working with a CFO who considers marketing a cost center versus a growth lever, what tips, other than having a good relationship, would you give the marketer on that one? Because that is where, I hear from our listeners, one of the tougher things. They see me as a cost center only. They're unwilling to take long-term risks. What advice do you have someone with a CFO like that?
No, I would take them into the data. You know what? CFOs love data. Yeah. Obviously, they love numbers. They love data. They love financials. I know I, for one, years ago, had zero appreciation for the amount of math that goes into marketing. And I learned that from you and your team many years ago. I know this sounds like a gigantic suck up to Mike Linton show here.
We're kind of enjoying it on the show, actually. So.
Yeah. but I think you and your team took me through the data and through the numbers. And it was kind of fascinating kind of looking at that. And I learned that through the brand valuation study. Also, I think that would be the best thing I would recommend, is just taking the CFO through the data, through the power of the marketing math underneath that. And, my daughter, my younger daughter, she just graduated college, Villanova, a year ago or so. And no doubt she'll be listening. So, hey, Kelsey, just a little shout out to you. So she majored in marketing and data analytics. And college, those are actually merged together now.
Which is super important for marketing.
Yeah, not a surprise, right? And I was like, oh, of course it is. Of course it is. It's all data. Marketing, the foundation of marketing, there's a foundation of creativity, but there's a foundation of data. So that would be my top recommendation for marketers coming into the company, is kind of get to the CFO and just show them the data.
So we talked about the Hall of Fame best practices for marketers: build a relationship, show the data, actually have a two-way street discussion. Tell us some of the worst practices you've run into in marketing. Like, watch out for this. If you're doing it, you're probably not making the CFO happy.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the one thing that jumps to mind is, and not maybe directly related to the CFO, but I've seen stumbles in marketing presentations to board meetings, to board of directors.
Give us a couple examples of horror stories of marketing presentations.
Horror stories. Well, first of all, just over reliance on jargon, and use of acronyms and marketing. If you say, hey, D2C, well, I know D2C, direct to consumer, but that's kind of an example of kind of over reliance on jargon. If you're allotted 20 minutes for board presentation, don't show up with a 100-page deck. Don't show up with gigantic, data loaded deck pages there that, it's more, we used to say a couple of companies ago, the CEO would say, like, horses and duckies, give me more horses and duckies. So yeah, right. Isn't that funny? Yeah. Use of graphs, right? Use of bar charts or histograms. And use of key messages. So
I have never heard horses and duckies before. But
yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think that was a GE thing when I was at GE years ago. But very much focused on key messages, because if you think about it, you're going to a board meeting. The board members have, they may be in a series of meetings that day. It may be their third hour of the meeting. You see board members starting to doze off. And so you kind of have to read the room too, right?
Right.
So, and do not go over time.
Do not.
Do
And
not
also
go over your allotted time.
get to the point. Don't say the conclusion for the last 30 seconds.
Yeah. Oh, here's a funny one.
Discussion.
Here's a funny one I'm sure you've seen. Don't present a slide and say, oh, I'm not going to drain this slide, and then proceed to drain the slide. So how's that for recommendation? So
that's very pithy, Scott. All right. So, we ended up having a really good relationship, obviously, between the two departments, and the marketing CFO is critical to that. Talk to our audience about how you manage the marketing CFO, and then your take on how the marketing CFO is running all the it's helping run the agency contracts, the sponsorship deals, all, in addition to doing all the math and the interface for the company and the finance department. Give us some best practices for managing the marketing CFO from your.
Here's kind of my number one best practices. I was a corporate CFO. I did not feel the need to have all the business or functional CFOs direct report to me, and that I needed to control them. I was like, no. You're working for the function head. You're working for the CMO. That's your job. I'm happy to help wherever I can. You'll be dotted line. We'll keep lines of communication. So I think that's very important. I think it's very important for chief marketers to really kind of have their own CMO. As far as putting them in charge of sponsorships and agency contracts
and the math on it. Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's a ton of math on that. It's a great development opportunity for the finance organization too. I mean, you're a leader like I think I was, is, let your people have enough rope to kind of do their thing, and not enough rope to hang themselves on, right? So, and I know the individual we're talking about, he just did a masterful job on that. So, that's my best recommendation, is just, own your own CFO. The corporate CFO should be relatively hands off. Give them enough rope to kind of do their thing, and always be there if they need help. That was kind of my mantra.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add to that, we had an operating principle of surface bad news as fast as you can.
Well, boy, isn't that the truth? Yeah, because I can think of some examples where we got some bad news kind of late, and it's like, geez, I would have liked to have known that a little bit earlier. We could have done a little bit more to mitigate that. So, boy, I mean, I wouldn't say that's a CMO advice. That's an advice to anybody.
It is an advice to anybody, but one of the things about marketing is if it's bad news and it's going bad, it might correct itself, but it's probably like a cavity. It's only going to get worse, and it's going to hurt. It's going to destroy more of the. Get it filled right away. That was kind of how we ran it. So we're closing in. We're almost out. We're towards the end of the show. I should actually just say that right away. So last question. It's a two-parter. You can take one or both, but you must take at least one. Funniest story or piece of practical advice we haven't discussed yet for our listeners. You can take one or both, but since you did claim as chief fun officer, I'm sure our listeners are counting on something funny.
Well, that chief fun officer, that may have came out of a Agent Achievement Club event you and I were at many years ago, and the theme of the party was a pirate party. So I think to this day, you and I still exchange pirate jokes. We celebrate Talk Like a Pirate Day, I think, once a year. So I guess maybe that's my funny story here.
So I'll just, for one little thing, I'll play it for you, Scott. What's the pirate's favorite country?
Argentina.
There we go. All right. So there's the funniest story. Now
never gets old, right?
Never gets old. Let's go to the piece of practical advice.
No, I mean, I think from a practical advice, and I touched on this earlier, and this has served me very well in my career, is just never be afraid to ask questions, even stupid questions. And I'm always happy to preface a question saying, hey, this may be a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. And even though in my mind, it really wasn't a stupid question, but putting that aside. And I think that's particularly important with the CFO, and really understanding what makes the CFO's mind tick. And you know what? It's going to be a really great opportunity to build a relationship and to teach the CFO kind of the craft of marketing. And I know I was I welcomed that very, very much. And, I just learned the whole art of asking questions and never being afraid to be, curious, never be afraid to curious and intellectual curious. I learned that at PwC many years ago as a staff auditor. And the other thing too is I just always have embraced lifelong learning. I must say, even after 35 years of working, I think rarely is there a day that passes where I don't learn something, if not a number of things. Yeah.
I'll also say, I think that's a really good point. It's a two-way street. Like, I learned a lot about the financial structure, a bunch of accounting rules that turned out very helpful to me. And also when a public company, you learned a lot about investor relations and what analysts actually thought.
Yeah.
And that was super helpful for marketing. So it's a two-way street. I think a great piece of advice to end the show. So Scott, we really want to thank you for being on the show. And thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. If you are enjoying the show, please like, share, and subscribe. Look for all of our shows on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and the I Hear Everything Network, which include Marketing, the Battle Between Believers and Non-Believers, Parts 1, 2, and 3. Is the CMO position the hardest job in business? A report from the media front lines, what your agency really wants to tell you but won't, Part 1 and 2, and the Marketing CFO, why it might be right for your company. Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.